G'day, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm here with my regular co-host and all-round good bloke and legend, Mr. James Ibrahim. Jimmy, welcome, mate. How are you?
Thanks, mate. I love these intros.
No worries, man.
I take on a different persona every episode. So,
who are you today, Jackal?
Well, whatever you just said. The sound that sounds great. I'll settle with that.
Oh, that's all right. All right, mate. We'll stick with that one.
Yeah.
Mate,
How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm
Yeah?
good. I'm very well. I'm pumped, man.
You're
We're back
looking
for another
fresh.
one. Thank you, mate.
You are.
Thank you.
Did you get a haircut?
Yeah, a couple of days ago. You look still looking fresh.
sharp.
Oh, thank you, mate.
Yep.
You're probably due for one. I didn't even want to say it, but
Well, I'm sort of just maintaining the grey look.
the
It's,
great. You're killing it, mate. You're
I'm definitely
all over
trying.
it. You
Thank
don't need
you.
to try, mate. I think you're destroying
It's
that.
one of those natural
effortless.
things that sort of happens. You'll get there. Don't
How old are
worry.
you again?
Don't worry. Wow. Age is a number, isn't it?
Age is not. It is.
There's
mate.
no
It
emotion in
is.
the numbers.
Mate, you look fresh. Other than the bit of greys, it's well, not bit, but the multitude of greys showing through, man. You're looking fresh.
Thank
Otherwise,
you.
mate, you're looking good.
Thank you, mate. It's good to be back for another episode.
It is.
I'm super pumped about today's show because
Yes,
We've been-
you wanted to run a topic.
well,
today,
you've been
mate.
going around the edges a little bit. I know you've done. You've
Am I?
been. You have been.
Okay.
Yeah, on the other podcast.
What
you
am I
know
dancing around the edges,
Yeah,
bro?
you sort of.
Okay.
You're dancing. You had one foot on the
Okay.
dance floor, one foot off.
I don't normally have one foot on. I normally have both on because I worm. So like, it's not. Yeah, I got the worm going,
Actually-
mate. So I don't. Not too much feet on floor.
We are digressing, but
Okay.
you are renowned for the worm, and that's not the bottom half. We're talking in terms of your dance moves.
Yeah, man. It's a trademark. It's a trademark move. I'm a terrible dancer. But when it comes to the worm, I was born with a gift. We'll put it that way. I was born with a gift.
Now-
I do love to break the worm out.
I get it,
Yep.
but is it one of those party tricks that once you've done it, it's pretty hard to get the same response second time? So is it like a one thing?
I normally leave it for once a night. It's normally once a night unless I get chanted. I get the overhead claps and.
Oh, it's a
and
closer.
Oh, mate.
It's like
Mate.
this is the finale.
It depends. It depends on how well received it was early in the night. Quite often, they call it a worm runway, and it's a bit like a
It's the New Zealander runway.
mate. I'll tell you, it's like the the Wall of Honor or whatever it is. I don't know whether
So they all
it's a part, man. It's like Jesus, like the sea
Moses?
parts for me. Yeah, Moses. There you go.
Moses,
Yeah, I don't know. There you see, I'm not.
he's a religious man.
Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah, okay, there you go. Moses part of the sea for my worm, pretty much.
Jeez. And I can imagine if the party's a bit quiet, throw in the worm, get
Oh,
it
mate.
started.
Mate, it kicks it off.
Okay.
It kicks it off.
Wow.
It might be a new segment, mate. Worm
The worm
worthy-
of the week.
Worm worthy deals, mate. What do you reckon? Wise Wednesdays, worm worthy deals.
Are you saying
Mm,
to all the listeners,
yes.
because we film these,
Yep.
that there might be a day when you do the worm as part of the podcast, so we'll actually record that.
Mate, I'm going to ask.
Oh,
no,
it's a
I'm gonna ask
deflection.
producer- No, it's not a deflection at all. I'm going to ask the producer here, Tommy.
Tommy?
Mate, what's a big number that we're aiming for? I have no idea about podcasts or anything here, mate. I just get on and have a yarn with you. What's a big number we should be aiming for, mate?
I'll tell you what, we make it to 500. Let's make it 500.
That seems pretty
500
light on. I
downloads or
think
views?
No,
Views.
500 subscribers.
Oh,
subscribers.
subscribers.
We're already at that, aren't we?
Oh, don't get ahead of yourself.
1,000. We'll call it 1,000.
Yeah, go the clean 1,000.
Clean grand.
Yes.
All right, clean grand. All right, if we hit 1,000, I'll start a net with a worm.
Wow.
So if that's a reason to share, subscribe, do your thing, Australian Property Scout, all the rest of it.
So if you were looking at a strategy,
Yep.
we're going to build up our subscribers to 1,000. You're going to do the worm,
Yep.
then they're going to fall off. So,
Well,
good strategy. That's a great.
There is another. Okay, here we go. There's 1,000 for the worm. You know what else comes after the worm when I'm in my flow?
The slug?
That's you, mate, just sitting there on the floor. No, it's the windmill. The windmill comes out. Bro, I was a little breakdown too. I was a little kid, man. I could send it, full send it. I still can,
I can
mate.
picture you on the farm in
So
the
10
rabbits in the
Mate,
shed.
yeah, it's just worming to the beat of the rabbit thump, like smacking his foot on the ground. That's me, man.
All
The
right,
worm.
so we've just set the platform.
1,000 subscribers, the worm. 10,000, we get the windmill. The windmill come
10.
out.
Okay. Well, I'm expecting big things from this windmill. If you're going 10,000, it's got to be.
Mate, I grew up in Southern Islands, not too far from Central Tablelands. They got some big bloody windmills
Okay.
down there.
Not
Big
much to do
windmills.
down there, hey?
Just dance moves in the paddock by yourself or
All
in the
right.
rabbit farm.
Well, before
we've gone so far.
before we
What are
lose some
talking about?
subscribers, we probably should dial back
Yeah,
in
yeah,
to
Wow.
the objective. We
Yes.
sort of went a little bit off, but that's the beauty of you having your own podcast. You
It is,
can
mate.
really do
Just
whatever you like.
Talk shit. Yeah.
But today, we are going to go a bit deeper
Mm.
and we are going to focus on, if you don't mind, your first 6 properties.
Yes.
Because I think it's always good to revisit.
Yep.
Because in a future episode, we're going to look at how would you recreate
Yep.
the first 10 properties as of today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think before we do something like that, we really have to get the numbers
Mm.
on the first 6.
Yep.
And then also look at how that portfolio was built, all the details, and people
Yep.
love the numbers.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then we will look at what is that? What are those 6
Yeah,
properties
yeah.
worth today?
Yeah, I think the big thing too, mate. I know you asked me about this. How do we segment my portfolio? It's reasonably large. How do we segment it into bite-sized chunks that we can probably knock over into podcast? We probably just lost the property talking shit about worms and windmills and whatnot, but we'll see how
That's
we go.
on you.
Debatable, but mate, I think it's a really good precursor because when I kind of hit the 6, that was where a few things happened. So we can dive into that at the end. But the 6 was a really good. Yeah, it was my first run, my kind of first foray into it all, and before I started hitting some serious issues and need to work around them, which we can get into later on.
All right. Well, let's dive straight
Mate.
in, shall we? Let's dive in.
Go for it,
Number 1. Where did it all begin?
mate. It all began in the little seaside village, with about 500,000 people there, of Wollongong.
The Gong.
So I
You
started
bought
in
it in
the Gong.
Wollongong.
I did, mate. Yeah. So, look, I guess throwing it back to that, we would have heard on the previous podcast where we were talking about my old boy kind of pushing me into the idea of property rather than the Supra, and going down that Jap car path and whatnot. And so for me, there was 2 locations I was really looking at, and one being Wollongong, big, strong, diverse city, quite close, obviously, to Sydney, only about an hour and a half out of Sydney on the coast, big university city, steel city, all the rest of it. And the other one for me was Campbelltown, which was very close to home for me, about half an hour away. You could buy houses for similar money, but Campbelltown definitely carried more of a stigma in terms of being lower socioeconomic. And, you hear, especially being a young fella starting out, you hear a lot of good things and bad things and the things to watch out for and try and avoid. So I kind of thought it would be slightly more of a blue chip sort of asset for my budget, which was it was sub 300 grand. I didn't quite have 300 grand to spend. I was pretty close to that. And I nailed down to a couple of areas, and the rental return on a unit compared to a house in those two assets, it was slightly higher for the unit. The one thing I didn't take into account and didn't really know about was strata. So, on paper it looked great, it looked slightly better, next year it was like $30-$40 a week. I thought, beautiful, this thing's perfect, great little thing to kick off.
Before strata, prior to strata.
Prior to strata.
Yeah.
And then the strata was, I think when I first bought it, I don't know, $500-$600 a week, a quarter or something like that, which obviously added up. It was a little over $2,000 a year, which knocked about $40 a week off the rent. So that was a tough thing. But we'll dive into that one, mate.
So let's start with the year. So that you purchased that in
2009.
Okay, we purchased 2009, a unit in Wollongong.
Yep, I'd probably been looking for about 3-6 months, something like that. Took my time getting my pre-approval. Get everything sorted from that front. I went down. It was an online lender, online kind of like a hub that you could compare rates, called Rate City. I went to Rate City, got an online lender through there who is no longer in One Direct, who's no longer in business. They're a subsidiary of ANZ, kind of got swallowed back up. But yeah, man, got them. I literally had a pre-approval for a max purchase price. I think I was of 280 at the time. Okay. And yeah, got out in the hunt and started walking the streets.
Awesome. So and isn't that interesting? You were living in that area, right? So for most people,
yep,
they will buy their first property where they live.
It was close. But
I mean, within an hour drive, half an hour.
So it was 40 minutes. So it was like almost 50 kilometers on the dot from leaving my parents' farm to getting into the under garage of this unit. It was literally like 50 Ks on the dot from door to door. Okay. So it was close without being, right on the doorstep sort of thing. Definitely still within the backyard. I was looking at where they made the most sense in proximity to me, which is a common, action and I guess can be a common mistake for a lot of beginner investors and first timers and whatnot as well.
Was it a unit part of a complex?
Yes.
Was it how many in there?
Yeah. So it was part of like a 24 block, right? But it was part of a bigger a bigger community where you had a block of 24 at the front, and then you had a block of 36 behind, and a block of 48 to the side. And they'd been built at different times in different years, sort of thing. 5 years apart. I think mine was 94, 99, 2004, something like that. There was about a 5-year split between them. But it was good, man. Like going down and seeing these things and going through them. It was actually a nice, tidy little joint. I knew that they were building a brand new town centre in Wollongong, so the Wollongong Centro, whatever it was called, can't remember what it was bloody called. But they ripped down this old, like decrepit, there was literally nothing there in behind the block at the time. And then they ripped this whole thing down and built this big, beautiful new centre in there. So I knew that was coming in, which would obviously help gentrify the area as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we're looking at two better? Two better?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. And what this would have been the first deal you actually negotiated on. Do you remember the negotiation?
It wasn't. It was the first deal I negotiated on that I bought, but I actually negotiated on heaps of other deals that never came together.
That's an interesting point. How many deals?
I probably passed on and just missed out on about 10 other deals, I reckon. I wouldn't know the exact number. It's just 13 years ago. Going back a little bit now.
But that's huge.
Yeah, man. A lot.
Because most people would have thought after a few, not in this game's, maybe the game's not for me.
Well, I was taking my time. I've always been a bit of a bargain hunter. I go to Woolies, and there might be my favorite brand, Kraft peanut butter crunchy sitting on the shelf because the half price of, I don't know, Sanitarium or whatever the hell the other brands are sitting next to it. Mate, as much as I love the Kraft, if there's a half price discount there, I'm buying that one.
You love a good deal.
Oh, mate, I love a good deal. Life's all about deals.
2 for 1.
2 for 1, mate. 100%. Amazing. So yeah, man, like I knew I was always hungry for a deal and try and get like the best result that I could. So I came very close on a few deals, but then never really pulled the trigger on anything. When I found this particular deal, I actually first got access to it off market, which is so crazy for my first deal, right? And I didn't even really do any research. I didn't know anything really about off markets. It actually threw me a little being off market. But I went and had a look at another one in the same block about a month earlier that had sold for 300 grand. It was on for, it might have sold 300, 310. I think it was on for 300, sold somewhere between that 300, 310 mark. And it was a dog box compared to this thing. Like it was terrible. It was a bunch of uni students living in there. It was a wreck. It needed updated kitchen. It needed a lot of work, right? Whereas the one that I went into, it was quite nice, man. Like it still needed a bit of updating, but it was still in decent nick. Like it was serviceable for now. And so that really like got me excited on it. The big thing on it though with me was I couldn't make the call and pull the trigger on it before my parents had come and seen it, because I knew this was the one and I was pretty much at the money. And she called me. I'd looked at one of this lady agent. I'd looked at one of her other properties before, and then that's why she called me about this one. She goes, "I'm just letting you know, I'm just calling you before I list it. I know you've been looking for a little bit now. I've got this one coming up. If you'd like to come down and have a look." So I went down and had a look at it. And she goes, "But if you're gonna buy it at this money, you need to put the offer in tonight. And can you let me know?" And I said, "Oh, I can't get my parents to come down tonight. Like the earliest I'd be able to do it would be Saturday." And she goes, "Look, if it's going to be Saturday, I've got to list it today," because I think it was a Wednesday or something. She goes, "I've got to list it today to have the people there on Saturday, because this lady, this seller is really urgent. She really needs to get this thing gone. She needs to have a contract on this thing by this weekend." So yeah, man. So she listed it that day. I went and viewed it myself that night, and she goes, "If you can give me the 275 on paper right now," she had a contract.
Wow. So the other one just sold for 300.
300. Yeah, yep.
This was listed for 275. She actually listed it.
Yeah, she listed it. She's
How
like,
come? Why was it so much cheaper?
Urgent sale.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So
Divorce sale.
Okay.
Need it done. Little bit of a spiteful seller. Didn't want to be splitting, more than she had to with the hubby sort of thing.
And just so everyone understands, your parents, were they guarantor or anything, or
No.
they just
Nah.
Did you need their approval, or did they say you need to, before you do this, we want to have a look at it?
No, I think mentally for myself, first property, man, I think I was making $750 a week, clearing $584 a week after tax. Like it was a huge deal, man. Like I think that's only equates to like 35, 38 grand or something like that a year. Yep. So to buy something for 275 is big. It was big money to
Especially
me back then.
Income.
Yeah, 100%.
And parents, what did they think of it?
This was the big thing. So rocked up on the Saturday, and it was in a lot of people, unless you invested at that time of the market, they brought these first home owner grants in. So I'd saved about 27, 28 grand, I think it was. The first home owner's grant at the time was 7 grand, right? And then they doubled it to 14, and I'd missed that window of buying there because I didn't feel like I was getting a good enough deal. And I ended up, and then they halved the double amount. So it went to 7, they gave you the extra 7 to 14, and then they halved it. So it was 10.5 grand. Essentially when I bought 10.5 grand with no stamp duty. So it's great to have that first time owner grant, there. I actually wouldn't have been able to buy that property if those things weren't in place. So anyway, went down with them on the weekend. That environment of no stamp duty and that grant meant there was a lot of first home buyers out trying to buy at the moment. And when we rocked up, I remember there was a line like all the way down the street. Like it was, mate. And I just remember my dad laughing. He goes, mate, there's no chance you're getting this thing. Like 0 chance. Like, look at the line down the street, mate. Like, should we just keep driving? You know what I mean? He's like, he probably didn't say the last bit. But he joked with me that there was no chance I was going to get it. We parked up the street. We started walking back down. And the agent was standing out the front because I got there like right on time, but she was only taking through a select few people that she knew were dead serious before the open. And so I went in with her. She's like, "Oh, Sam, come." And so she walked me up, and I was like, "Oh shit!" Like, I felt a little bit. Here we go, a little bit going on. And I got in there. It was about 6. There was about 6 of us, 6 groups that were going through inspecting this joint. And a couple of the others like didn't look that serious, but then I could see there were these 2 blokes. I'm pretty sure they were builders or whatever at the time, going through like super precise, notepad in hand, measuring things out, knowing what they were going to do. They look like little renovators or flippers or something. And so I thought, shit, that's my competition. Walked through it with her, and my parents and everything. They're like, oh, wow, this is great. Yeah, I really love this thing. Yeah, it's awesome. It had its own internal laundry, big balcony off it, all the rest. It was really, really good value. It faced in as well instead of out onto the street, into the little complex. It was a really nice one, man. Worth more than the one that had sold for 300, 310, whatever it was. Yeah, man. And then it was on like, I was like, shit, well, what do I do? And she said, look, we're going to look at all offers after the open. So, because I just said, oh, look, I probably won't submit anything just yet. And she goes, just have you think. But she said, make sure you come back to me the Savo because it's going to sell the Savo. So I went down to a little coffee shop, sitting there with my parents, and they're like, yeah, we love it. Like 100% think you should buy it. And I think that little tick of approval was all I needed. So I called her up and I told her, I go, look, I'll do it at the 275. Let's do it. List price. I don't care. Like I'll pay it. And she goes, we've already got like multiple offers in there at that money. I was like, oh shit. And she goes, you're probably going to need to come up a little bit to beat this thing. And I couldn't, even though I knew there was great value in it, I couldn't raise my price. I couldn't go above list price. So I couldn't do it. And I go, all right, look, just give me 10 minutes and I'll call you back. And then I was speaking to my parents and I can't even remember what they said to me about it. And I just couldn't do it. And I called her back and I go, look, I'm really sorry. I can't do it. And she goes, look, the builder guys that were there as well, they've just raised the offer to 280. She goes, if you can't do it, it's okay. Like, don't worry about it. I'll just submit the offers. I'll tell the background story, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. Yeah, man. And she called.
So you submitted 275.
Yep.
They submitted 280.
Yep.
They were the 2 offers that were submitted.
Apparently there was other offers.
Oh, there's more.
I think so, man. It's a long time. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember I was 100% competing against those guys and they were $5,000 dearer.
Got it.
Remember that completely. And then she called me back an hour later and she goes, I don't believe it, but the seller's gone with your offer.
Get out.
And I
How
go,
good is
no
that?
way. And she's like, yeah. And she goes, I just told her about your story. She said, I know you're young, you just told her you're a young fella, it's your first property. You're super nervous about going above. These other guys are just adding another ones to the portfolio, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, she's going through divorce. She's getting barely anything from it anyway. When she splits with us, what's $2,500 in the scheme of things, is what she'd said to the lady. And mate, that was on one. That's what kicked it off.
Dude, so, how incredible is that?
Crazy, man.
What an awesome.
Crazy.
I'm sure no one's heard that before, right?
Probably not.
Well, there's a lot of lessons there just in that without even going through the full numbers. But the relationship that you built, and we're talking about for a lot of the listeners out there, if you want to buy properties on your own, the kind of things you need to do, right?
Yeah.
So you had looked at 10 properties, you had gone through and made bids, you had developed the relationships. So this agent knew you, called you, told you. Mm-hmm. That's all in the back of all the legwork that you had done.
Yeah. Definitely.
That there is a massive gem for anyone wanting to go out and buy a property. You got to be in the market. You got to be present.
Yeah. You can't just be scrolling, man. You can't just be scrolling.
You got to pick up the phone.
100%.
Visit.
Yep.
Talk.
Yeah. You got to build the relationships. So it's the same as what we do now, within the business, within Australian Property Scout, and what we do as buyers agents. It's all about building those relationships. You have those relationships, and it's even like in that sense, wasn't if I created some crazy relationship with her, but I obviously had left an impression on her that she wanted to help me, you know, and it was, yeah, man, it was amazing. She obviously sold a pretty good story to that owner as well. And I was lucky, I think, in the sense of what the owner was willing to let it go for me.
So that first deal, what if you can try and encapsulate the feeling that when you got off the phone?
Yeah. Oh man, I've got this thing whenever something like mad happens or I get, you know, you hear some inspiration speech, you get that cold rush through your body, like that cold, and you get the goosebumps, man. That's what it was. Like straight away, you can't help, man. You tear up. You know, you get very, very excited and emotional. First year was always an emotional one.
3 years in the making too, right?
Yeah, long time.
All that discipline, all the sacrifice we spoke about the first step.
Yep.
All that sacrifice into that moment. That's so cool.
And I knew it was a good deal too. So that just made me very, very happy. So
and so that was your PPR? Was that at the time you treated it as your primary place?
Moved into it. It was she was a little older and dated. And so man, I had some plans to go in there and do some light cosmetic works, give her a paint, you know, revamp the kitchen a bit, bathroom and whatnot too. So
that is so awesome. So you were living in it at that time?
Yes.
And what kind of LVR did you have on that?
But I bought it at 90%.
90%. Mate, I love that. That is because, you know, when people say sometimes you're lucky on these kind of situations, you've got to be in the game. You've got to be on the field to have a chance of scoring, right? And you put yourself in the best position in that circle of influence or that we spoke about the other day. That was your moment.
Definitely. Yeah, man, it was a game changer for me, hey? Because I don't know. The other big thing too was like, you know, I didn't know if I would have got another deal that good. And I kept like missing out on deals by like a few grand, $5,000 here and there.
The sliding door moment.
Yeah, man. And the big thing is too, you miss a deal that's that good, it's then very hard to pull the trigger on something else after. So
because you're always going to be comparing it to that kind of value, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So that is a cracker, right? And so then what do we do? You lived in it, or did you rented it out eventually?
I lived in it. Yeah. So I lived in it for a while. I probably lived in it it was around about a year. Had a mate living with me who was going to Wollongong Uni. Yeah, man, he pretty much he bought all the groceries and I got to, and you know what I mean? I didn't have to pay for anything in terms of like living on that side. He'd go buy everything, all food-wise, everything, and I'd cover the mortgage and whatnot. And yeah, man, he was living down there during uni. We'd get, you know, give a bit of renovate, go through, give it the paint, and we did all that sort of work in the last few months that we're there. But in the end, man, it was the strata bills that brought me undone. I also had an old clapped out car at the time, and the timing belt went on at the same time that I got the last big strata bill that killed me. And man, I was running very, very close to the sun, so I had to move out and rent the thing out. And yeah, man.
And what did you rent it for when you started renting it?
$340 a week, I believe, was the first rent I got for it.
Great,
not bad.
So you got to be happy with that yield.
It was all right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't buy it these days. Wouldn't buy it these days.
For your first property as a 19-year-old.
Not bad.
You'd be happy with that.
Yeah, you got to remember as well, interest rates were 7%.
Okay.
So I was feeling her a tad.
And 2009 was around GFC time too, right?
Yeah, it was just after. So GFC obviously 07, 08. Yeah. It was in the little bit of an aftermath. I mean, that's why they brought those grants in to try and reignite and kickstart the market. Yep. Yeah, man, it works. Did well.
And I suppose in a sentence, what was the key takeaway from that property? Like, what was the
biggest one was getting started, you know, getting out there, doing my thing, getting out there hunting. I was lucky in the sense of, I had the flexibility in the sense of work where I could finish after work. And if I needed to finish at 3 p.m. to go view the property at 3:30, 4 o'clock, I'd start a couple of hours earlier and just knock it over like that. So I had a bit of flexibility with that too. But, yeah, man, it was getting on the ground. And if you're going to do it yourself, you have to try and build those relationships because they're everything, man. Otherwise, you're competing against people like me who do it for a living and have those relationships. You got to try and, you know, it's even that sense, like they knew that those renovators were serious guys, but I'd built that relationship that almost like went over that, you know, someone felt good for me. So,
and the uplift, like what did you do? What was the time frame before you went from that one to the next one?
Yeah. So look, that was at the end of 2019. It
2009.
Sorry. Yeah. Shit. I'm forgetting my bloody age here, mate. Yeah. So sorry, the end of 2009. That would be a quick journey to hit 40 properties from 2019. That would be
pretty good.
I have as many grey hairs as you.
You probably would have a few more.
Yeah. So 2009, November 2009. And then, mate, it was in early 2022. I was hunting for a block of dirt. 2012. Sorry, God. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, keep running around.
So 2012.
2012.
Okay, so there was a decent period.
It was about 2.5 years.
Okay.
because, man, I didn't have the money. I couldn't say. I was just trying to get back in front again and get it saved up again.
Yep.
I didn't understand at the time about equity and stuff. It took me a bit of time. So what happened was, like, after I bought that one as well, I was at my dentist down in Bowral, funnily enough, and I saw a property magazine. I think I told you in one of the last episodes, I really got my property mags. It was that property mag sitting on that table and me picking that up and reading that mag that day. Literally, if he was running on time, I probably maybe never would have picked that up, or it would have been a lot more delayed or something maybe. But I picked that up and I read it for about 10 minutes, and mate, I didn't even want to talk to the dude. I just wanted to get this thing done, get out. I want to go to news agent.
That was the first time you saw that mag.
Yeah. And man, I just wanted to go to the news agencies and buy it. And then when I went there after, realized there was 3 property mags out at the time in publication. So I bought all 3 of them, read them back to front in about a week, and then I subscribed to all 3 of them, and just religiously like read and ate that content over the next few years. And that's where I was trying to build up my deposit. Then I learned about releasing equity during that process as well. And that's where I went back and had a crack. The issue was I was struggling to get decent enough vals to be able to pull capital back out of that deal. So I could get vals around like 300, but it was very little that I was going to be able to get out to be able to kind of keep moving forward. So that kind of slowed me down a little bit on the journey. But I probably didn't start that until maybe 18 months after buying it anyway, maybe even longer. So I was saving a bit of cash for the second one. I'd learnt the strategy of the second one as well. Speaking to my girlfriend at the time, her brother-in-law, he had done a few of these too. And essentially what he'd done is he'd gone out and he sourced these land. Tried to kind of source land at wholesale, and then he'd build speckies on them and turn himself a nice little profit.
In terms of speckies, so people understand.
Yeah, sorry, it's like a spec home. So which
standard builder's range kind of home.
Yep. So what we used to aim for back in the day, and even up until just recently with the inflation sending build prices crazy, mate, you could build homes for less than or around about $1,000 a square meter, which is insane. And so that's essentially what you did. You go find a block at good money, make sure it's in a suburb that you could turn a profit around on that in terms of block, build on it, landscape, cost. Let's say with this deal in particular, well, actually, you know what I mean? Like it's the end values.
Yep.
So let's say 350, your end value is 400, but your total cost was 350, you make 50 grand. So that was kind of the concept of it. And that's what got me started and out there hunting to try and find the right deal, the right site.
And that's a pretty ballsy move though, to go from buying a unit to then wanting to go and buy some dirt to build.
It definitely was. And it comes back to the point we made in the last one, finding someone who's done what you want to do.
Yes.
And so I was trying to find these different strategies, and my big issue was generating the equity, the capital for those next deals, because I made so little that I was really struggling to save up enough money for another deposit, especially with a negatively geared property. Like that property was costing me like 5-10 grand a year or whatever it was at the time. I was obviously able to claim a bit of it back. But man, it was bleeding me. So it was very hard for me to save additional money. So I knew I needed to do a deal that was going to make me money. And yeah, that's pretty much where I'd kind of run through with him his couple of deals that he had done within it as well. And then I set out there to try and essentially beat what he had done to try and achieve the highest and best outcome on a deal that I could.
So we bought some land.
Yep.
Engaged the builder.
Yep.
Where were we buying? What was that one?
So it was down in Southern Highlands in New South Wales. So it's around about 2 hours south of Sydney. Mm-hmm. It was a very opportune time in the market. Again, I think like, you're right, man. Like you make your own luck. But at that time in 2012, the market was dead, especially for land. There was very, very little around. Sorry, there was a massive glut around and very, very few buyers around. So, man, like I was kind of almost hated by agents in the area at the time, because I was just going around smashing everyone with low ball offers, I knew that I had to buy something cheap to be able to make my margin on the way into a deal. So I just kept going around. And I probably did it for about 6 months until I ended up back at this development that had never sold. For some reason, it just never sold. And then it got super overgrown. And they'd listed them at like 200 grand. And I just threw in this wild ball. I hadn't even gone and looked at them. I just threw this wild ball for 100 grand. Just threw in 100 grand on it.
They were listing at 200 for just the land.
Yeah.
And you threw in a low ball at 100.
100 grand, yeah.
And got it.
No.
I was going to say,
get it. So I was
the Messiah.
Moses, where's the worm? No, it was, so I just like, I was, the old saying, you throw enough at a wall and something's going to stick. And the idea was to try and draw a counter. I've read all these different strategies. I'd heard all these different things. The idea was to try and draw a counter. So throw some stupid offer in that someone actually comes back on it, because then you're going to know that, someone's actually trying to sell you, because they've actually haven't just told us to,
yes,
whatever. They've come back with an actual counter. So they came back at 180, which was an immediate 10% drop. Like, it doesn't sound like much because it's 20 grand, but when you're making 40 grand or whatever, 45 grand a year or whatever it was at the time, at that point, that's half my income. So to get that as a reduction was a huge thing. And we pretty much, cut a long story short, we did a lot of backwards and forwards on this thing. I played the old card of, it's my first property. Like, I don't have that much money, all the rest of it sort of thing, which it wasn't my first property, but I didn't have much money. I was struggling. And yeah, man. So we came backwards and forwards, and we kind of ended up at a bit of a stalemate. I was stuck at about 120 and they were stuck at the 150.
So you brought them down that much?
Yeah, man. Like, they were cutting big, because I think they knew, and it was a smart strategy in the end. The little development had it was a 3-stage subdivision of about 25 blocks. And it was the very end of the cul-de-sac, which actually is normally the most desirable. The very end of it hadn't sold. So they'd sold the other two in the little, me first home buyer boom, where I'd gone and bought my unit. Where it was all really taken off that time. They'd sold the first 2 stages of land at that time, because the grants that I was getting for the existing, they were doubled again for new homes and for land to build, right? So it's huge. So they sold them easy, but then they sold them for like decent money, and then they upped the price on the last blocks when all those grants went. So they were playing in a market that they just shouldn't have been that high. And then these things got a stink about them. Like, there must be something wrong with those blocks. They're not selling, right? And I think they were smart enough to realize they just need to chop one to see a sold sign go up. And then it was game on. I think that was their strategy, right? Looking back, it was a cool thing, man. After a lot of backwards and forwards, we kept coming. We ended up coming to the 120 to 150, 130 to 140 after a lot of like little $2,000 increment bullshitting. And then I stalled on the 130, and I really stalled on that and didn't want to go above it. 125, 130, something like that. And then they stayed the same at 140. And they're like, and the agent was telling me, they're digging their heels in, man. Like 140 is it. If you want this thing, and he's like, mate, you're down 30% on list price. It's the second biggest block. Man, it was 930 squares. Like, it was freaking huge. And I knew, which a lot of people didn't, that this entire section out the back that looked heaps average and scrubby and stuff was actually getting cleared out. And they call it borrowed views. So you're in like a semi-resi spot, and then you look over all this farmland, right? Over like hundreds of acres of farmland. And that's what it was. When all this was going to get cleared out, it was going to get, this block would have achieved those borrowed views.
How did you know that? Just your own due diligence?
I went down. Yes, I went down. I went and had a look at them. I went and had a look at the blocks. This is early in the piece when a bit of that stuck and they did the counter. I went down and had a look at them, and down on the back of these, I went down to the back of the block. It was like chest high grass. Like, I was worried I was going to get taken out by a tiger snake or a tiger or one or the other. Like, I was going to get smacked by something. Didn't happen. But I went down and there was these big X's on the trees, but actually they weren't big. Like, there was these black X's on the trees, and I was like, shit. And I called my old boy and had a chat to me. He goes, yeah, like, I reckon they're going to get rid of him. So I called council, and they're like, oh yeah, that whole section there, that's all being cleared. Oh yeah, when's that being done? Oh, in about 2 months. So I was like,
that is a perler there,
mate.
That gem there,
yeah, mate.
Because most people would have just thought, nah, crappy view, not doing it.
And it was all the old willows and stuff. So like, it looked
rubbish.
Terrible, man. Yeah, very, very terrible. Like, willows look all right if they're over a creek by themselves, heaps far away, driving past. It looks kind of beautiful. But when they're straight out the back of your block, it looks like a serial killer is going to come out of there in the night and steal your baby or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty dodgy looking shit. And yeah, man. So when I knew they were going to go, I knew the values were immediately going to increase on them as well. Anyway, after a lot of backwards and forwards and all the rest of it that went on, we kind of got within $5,000 of each other, and we ended up at $133,000 for the block, listed at
200.
Listed at $200,000.
Mate, the appetite to negotiate on that's pretty. Again, that's a ballsy move.
It was,
and that's awesome.
Throwing a lot around. So,
what do you think to be able to negotiate and do things like that, especially when you're starting out, the confidence to do that? Do you think it was just because of your girlfriend's brother-in-law at the time, or did you just have this inherent ability to sniff out a deal and you just had the confidence to negotiate? Because a lot of people wouldn't have the guts, not because they're any worse or anything, just the confidence to do it.
You know, the big thing about like we spoke about in that first episode of like the mindset of a successful investor. Mate, I didn't have the confidence to do it, but I couldn't afford to pay more. So like I could have and made no money on the deal. You know, I could have probably, you know, if I'd come back at 150, I probably would end up at 170 or something like that.
So your back was against the wall.
Yeah, it was what I had to pay to make money in the deal. And I think a lot of the time, that's where you got to look at it. It's like, what do I need to buy this for to actually make money? Not what can I get it for? It's what do I need to buy it for to make money in the deal? I knew roughly what I could build for. I knew I wanted to build a certain spec and a certain size home and all the rest of it.
But you'd already not negotiated, but you'd researched build prices and spoke to builders before you even negotiated.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Yep. That's an important point too for a lot of people listening.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Doing all your research beforehand, so you were confident enough to know this is my price point.
I knew my numbers.
You knew your numbers.
I knew my numbers. So look, bought the block, mate, had an absolute shit fight for about 12 months. I don't think I've ever gone into this on anything else before, but had an absolute shit fight for, it was at least 6 months, maybe more, with this one builder. I just had it set in my mind. I wanted to build with them. I had like a 12-week build time. They had a really sharp pricing. I had all this good shit thrown in. But like by the time I'd wasted 6 months trying to get this thing to work with them, it just like, I was like, shit, I just have to move on. Like it was that young mindset. I got locked in that I was in my mind, I was going to do this. And it tapped me out for so long. And the reason why they had their 12-week build time and their really, really sharp pricing was because they had set designs that they didn't change from, right? And I should have realized it, but I was young. It was a mistake. The salesperson should just told me, look, we're never going to change to do exactly the way you're going to want to do this. And he said, we fluffed around for ages. Terrible design after terrible design. Ended up going to another builder that was slightly dearer. And he's like, yeah, mate, no worries. We'll flick this. We'll change this. We'll put this. Bang. Here we go. Within about 10 minutes, the other builder that couldn't get me a 4x2 with a theatre, which is what I wanted, and a double garage, because that was what the market demanded for that 450 roughly price. With 6 months of wasting with these other guys, in 10 minutes, this guy had it for me on the table at pretty well what I wanted to build at.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But you just touched on a point there about knowing what the market wanted at 450. Was that based on what was already selling in the area, or what?
Yeah.
You spoke to agents and they said people are looking for this kind of property?
Both. So like, it was what was the market demand for the most in demand product in the area at the time, and what would it sell for? Yep. So it was a 4x2 with a theatre, and the double garage, and that was pretty much it.
And so what was that? What was your total cost base?
So I bought the block for 133, built for 204.5. I got a $5,000 cash back as like a builder's boost on stamp duty. So my stamp duty was supposed to be, I think it was like $3,500. I actually ended up getting like $1,500 from the government as the grant for it instead of paying stamps. So that was cool. And I did all the landscaping myself except for the driveway. So I'd never touched concrete before. I always wanted it done properly. So I built all the fences, gates, retaining walls. So
we're looking at sub 350.
It was 355, I think, pretty much on the dot.
Okay.
That I did it for, and the value was around about that 450 mark.
Wow.
Yeah.
Straight away.
Yeah. Making $100,000 at that age when I wasn't even, man, I think I was barely making $50,000 a year at that point. Cause again, we're probably 12 months on from when I bought it. I literally doubled my annual income in profit on one deal.
Yep.
It was a pretty crazy feeling.
There's a lot of work involved in that though.
Huge.
You definitely grafted it out.
I did, but that's the funny thing is like people look at, we have to do so much work to do a good deal. And it's like, mate, I can tell you right now, I worked my absolute ass off all year to make $50,000. I didn't work anywhere near as hard.
Yep.
Like, yes, I had to use, intelligence and whatnot and negotiating tactics and getting outside my comfort zone and everything, learning all these different things to be able to make the 100. But it was a lot easier when you look at it.
Compared to your job.
Than doing 2 years of hard labor as a bloody, farmhand
10 hours a day.
Yeah, man. So like you got to put it into the equation,
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
And so you rented that property?
No. So I lived in that property.
Okay. So the first one is your PPR, then.
Yep. And then this became my PPR.
Okay. Got it.
Yep. Yes. This became my PPR, which ended the PPR rule or rate or whatever of the other one when I moved into it at that point.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Leveling up.
Yeah, man. Mate. Leveling up is what life is all about.
I love that. So to completely different deals for your first two. We've already gone for 40 minutes. We're supposed to get through 6 properties.
We fell a little short, mate.
Tommy, to be fair, the producer did say there is no way you're going to get through 6 properties.
He did say that.
And you were like, nah, 6.
We'll smash him. Then we start talking about the worm and then the windmill.
Well, the 5 minutes that we really missed out on that first 5 minutes. So the biggest takeaway then from this second deal, because there were so many key gems in that whole process. What would you put it down to?
I think the biggest takeaway on that, like you look at the money that was made on that deal, right? Circa, call it 100 grand. It was pretty well 100 grand. Just sticking to my guns. It was like the first one. I had a certain amount that I knew I had to pay, and a certain amount that I knew was a great deal at. And I just stuck at it. I was fortunate because it was very much a buyer's market at the time. So the last few years it hasn't been a buyer's market anywhere. It's been a pretty frothy, pretty hot market the last couple of years in the Australian property market. But yeah, it was a different time back then, and I really played that to my advantage. And I think you've got to play the hand you're dealt and work as hard as you can to make those numbers the best they can be. And I think I could have taken a slightly better block that didn't have, I had a building envelope on that one. That's why I had all the dick around with the other builder. I could have taken an easier block and probably paid an extra 30 or 40 grand. Wouldn't have been as big, maybe a 700 square block that was heaps easier to work, and I wouldn't have had as many building headaches, but I wouldn't have made anywhere near as much either. So I probably would have paid an extra 30 or 40. It probably would have been worth maybe 20 or 30 less because it was 200 plus square meters smaller land size. So yeah, man, I think like really sticking to my guns, knowing my numbers, knowing what I had to pay for it to make it a really, really good deal. That's the biggest thing. It's the biggest takeaway from it that I can.
The whole reverse engineering thing was just brilliant there.
Yeah.
And then you can negotiate with confidence.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Once you know your numbers, you know you can pay for stuff.
Yep.
And when it comes to something like that, it's not only knowing what you can pay for the block, it's obviously the land, the build as well.
Yep.
So if you get that wrong, you can be massively off with a build, especially in the current environment. You need to really know what you can build something at. But when you know that end figure, you work it back. And also, are you doing the labor yourself? Like the retaining walls and the fencing, everything that I built. I saved a huge amount of money doing that myself as opposed to, employing.
Well, you could have easily spent 30 grand doing that, right? Or paid for someone to do 30 grand doing that.
Mate, the fencing and the walls and everything, man, there was 20 grand pretty well in materials.
Yeah, wow.
But take the 5 grand out for the driveway, 15 grand in materials. A tradie would have charged you 35, 40 grand to do that, I reckon.
And if you paid market rate for the block or even close to that,
there's no profit in the deal.
Nothing.
Yeah.
That was the big difference.
To do it, pay market value for the block and pay someone else to do just the landscaping. Not even talking about the build and putting the build with someone else. Just those two things. You pretty much don't have any fat in the deal.
All right. So with 2 deals, by the end of that second deal, was property 1 still negatively geared?
Yes.
Still negatively geared.
Yeah. And at that point, I had renovated it though. I went back. I had, at the end of a couple of tenancies, I was like, needed to do a revamp. The carpet had turned to shit. The paint had kind of, gone a bit again as well. So I repainted it. I laid a floating floor the whole way through it. I did a kitchen revamp very, very cheaply. So I literally high gloss painted the doors because they were still quite good nick. Nice. The carcass was strong and put nice stainless steel handles on it. Looked great. New oven, dishwasher, those kind of things. Man, I literally did the whole thing for, I think it was less than 5 grand or something like that.
And you saw a massive uplift?
$400 a week rent. So it was a big
Great.
jump. Yeah,
and what about the equity uplift?
Yeah, so at the time, I'm pretty sure I had that valued, or it was being valued around about $350 at the time. So it was just as well as Sydney was starting to kind of pick up. Both the Highlands and Wollongong were about a year delayed compared to the actual Sydney market.
Yep.
So it was around about 2014 that it was starting to go. But yeah, she was probably worth around about $350 at the time.
And do you remember what the interest rates were for property 2 around that time with the house and build?
Ooh, you're testing me a little bit here, but I think it definitely would have been in the 5s. I don't know.
So
if
it pulled back a little bit.
It had pulled back a little bit. I don't think it was quite in the 6s. It would have been somewhere around like 5.5% to 6%. So still not cheap money, but they're kind of those long-term averages.
So looking at where you are at the end of property 2, we've got 2 assets. One of them's negatively geared. You've got a bit of equity now to play with that.
Yep.
You got a whole bunch of equity in your PPR.
Yep.
What was going through your head at that point?
So the strategist in me that had been reading and poring over all these different people's ideas and I'm formulating and working out my own strategy in my mind. was very simple. That the thing I needed to target next was positive cash flow. Like I was running out of serviceability pretty quick. I'd done well on the deals, and on paper, you know, if the banks weren't looking at the strata, on paper the unit was doing all right now because I had it at $400 a week, so it was doing okay. But it kind of neutrally geared itself out at that point too, because I had some depreciation being a unit. I'd done some renovations as well. Rents had obviously increased, rates had come back a little bit, so it had kind of leveled itself out at that point as well. Yeah, man, and that was pretty much it on that one. So cash flow was what I needed to target next up.
So we're going to be looking at property number 3. Are we going to dive into this now, or are we going to give it another?
Mate, I think we're running it. We're running tight. Minutes. We're getting wrapped up.
We're getting wrapped up.
I can see Christmas wrapping paper coming out of you. He's about to wrap you up and put it around your head, I think.
Well, to be fair, it's all the gems that you've been, all the bombs you've been throwing with all these two deals. I mean, it's incredible. There's some really good insights there. I think there's a lot of takeaways if we just to wrap it up.
Yeah.
First deal was purely about getting exposed to the market, doing the hard yards, doing that unrewarded running 10 properties. You put deals in, no one couldn't get anything across the line, and worked out you're the underbidder. You actually won, because of your relationship. So that is a massive gem there.
100%.
Number 2 for me is just due diligence, numbers, and knowing what the hell's going on in that market.
100%.
You knew that market better than anyone else.
Yeah.
And that's just time, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think the other big thing too was like getting smashed so hard with strata on the first one. It made me be like, shit, what actually are all the costs involved with this second one? And obviously I had that, like I said in the last one, getting a mentor and getting someone to help you with something like that as you go, and someone you can learn a few things off. I definitely picked a lot up, but I kept digging. What else have I got coming up that I have to be mindful of and careful of with this and plan for as well? So, yeah, man, knowing your numbers is huge. It's absolutely huge. Like, it's what property is all about, really.
I love that. And obviously we've tapped in today about your journey about buying on your own as a retail investor, someone who's not using anyone else to help you do that. And I know obviously with Australian Property Scout and a good buyer's agent does all the points that we've just spoken about, the due diligence, the numbers and all that. All of that is taken care of.
Definitely.
Which is really important. So if people are out there wondering, you know what, or if they don't even have the appetite to say, I actually don't want to spend the time doing that.
Yeah. Or even the other side of things as well is making sure you're crafting the right brief. You need handcrafting the right brief and then executing on the right property. Because I look back at myself now, like with that income, I never should have bought something that was going to be negatively geared for me. So if I'd used someone at the time that was an intelligent investor, I might have been able to get a nice discount, intelligent buyers, let's say, get something that was like a nice discount as say a house with no strata, maybe has some sort of value add potential on it. Can maybe buy in for cheaper, rent for the same or more, don't have the strata, got value add, abilities and potentials. I think I would have done a lot better with something like that as well. I'm not saying I did bad, but saying that something like that and the help of something like that would have really, to help me take it to the next level.
So you really had to unravel buying the wrong deal at the start to try and compensate. So we're sort of swinging back and forth.
And like that deal hamstrung me further along as well. Like we'll go into it a bit further into where it's like it was one of the things that made me hit a wall. So
I think we've underestimated how much time it takes to really unpack a deal. And I think the value is for people listening and proof will be in the pudding if the worm is going to come out, depending on how many people subscribe. But I think spending this amount of detail and going a deeper dive into them is quite helpful.
Yes.
What did you?
Yeah.
What's it like going down memory lane?
Man, it's good. It's honestly, man, I don't even think about it. I haven't thought about this stuff for so long. So it's awesome going back through it. And I hope people get a lot of value out of it as well, because it's really trying to pass on some lessons learned and giving back a bit of, things to look out for that a lot of people jump in and they don't think about, don't look out for. I really hope that it helps a lot of people out there with all of that as well.
So how about next ep, just planting the seed for everyone else? We've got the platform for the first two.
Yep.
How about we unpack and try and get from our third through to 6? Because I think things start to ramp up a little bit, don't they?
They do. We're pretty aggressive couple of years there of accumulation. I really kind of found my niche in my strategy as well of what worked quite well for me. And then that kind of tailwinded into a whole heap of shit happening kind of after that as well. So,
which is the snowball effect starting to build.
Definitely is, mate. Snowball effect is massive. Yep.
Dude, well done. That was awesome.
Thank you very much. And guys, anyone that needs help creating a brief, finding the right property, or
avoiding some of the mistakes that you can make.
100%. And even reviewing the existing portfolio,
Yes.
like what could we potentially do from this position now? You know, be hurting a little bit from the current interest rates or whatever. Any of that sort of stuff, guys. Any questions you might have for us on the podcast, head over to, on the socials at Australian Property Scout. And obviously also there is www.australianpropertyscout.com.au if you want to book in for a discovery session with the man, the myth, the legend, Jimmy himself. But thank you guys. Really appreciate your time. Jimmy, any last words, mate?
No, I think that was awesome. Heaps of gems there. I can't wait to get into the next app and see this next cash flow deal and how it shapes from there.
Let's do it, mate. Let's do it. Thank you, guys.